Hi, I'm Dan Schmitt. I do a weekly television show called Team Chicago Channel. My website is teamchicago.tv, teamchicago.tv. We're in St. Anne, Missouri, which is just northwest of downtown St. Louis, Missouri. We're at Donaldson Cycle, and in the next 10 or 12 minutes, I'm going to talk to some of the racers from the 70s, the flat track scene from the 1970s into the 80s, when I got involved with motorcycle racing. Just see what it was, the great days of flat track racing, and great stuff right here. Donaldson, BSA, Triumph, no more BSA, Triumph, Yamaha, Ducati, and Honda. The great motorcycle shop had this annual get-together, and we're going to continue to celebrate Neal Keen's birthday, I hope, in January every year. So in the next 10 or 12 minutes, we're going to talk to some of the people that are here, and remember my website. That's teamchicago.tv, teamchicago.tv. As we look at a few photos of Neal Keen, Neal Keen was considered the godfather of short track racing at Santa Fe Speedway and Granite City Speedway in the late 1960s and the 1970s. He won the AMA half-mile national championship at Ascot Park, and he was the Santa Fe Speedway track champion. As we look around this beautiful museum, we're looking at the leathers of Dick Mann. Dick Mann was one of the stars of the 1960s, 1970s, riding for BSA, a great friend of Neal Keen. Another great friend of Neal Keen was Darryl Hurst. And I had the opportunity to talk to this Houston AstroDome winner. So let's go to the interview with Darryl Hurst.
Darryl Hurst, national number 34, short tracker, entrepreneur, something or another. Good friend of Neal Keen's. Neal and me were good friends, and I'd come to St. Louis and Brown Road when they lived there and stay at his house, sleep in my truck and help him with parts and stuff at his shop. So we've been friends since back in the probably early 60s or mid 60s sometime. And we put on a short track in Cow Barn in Houston, Texas, Circle 8 Rodeo Arena, back in the early or late 60s. And a couple of the guys needed points because back then you had to make 5 points in the previous year to be a junior to ride the junior race at a national. So a bunch of the guys didn't have any points. So I said, well, let's just put on a professional race in the Cow Barn on Tuesday nights, because all winter we raced in the Cow Barn on Tuesday nights. So I got the sanction and we put the race on, and I put the money up, and Neal and W.T. Ruffner and a couple other national numbers show up down there for our Tuesday night Cow Barn race. And of course I told my other friends, I said, okay fellas, I said, we either got to cough up the $600 to pay the purse tonight, or we got to win the races and keep those 3 national numbers from taking home our money. So all the other 3 guys that were involved in our race promotion said, okay. I said, that or everybody's got to cough up a little money. I said, I can't afford to pay for all this out of my pocket myself. So the other 3 or 4 guys that were involved all agreed. And we ended up, I think Neal finished second. One of our guys won. Neal was second, and somebody else was third. I don't remember. And we paid all the guys off fairly of what they should have won, other than our Houston guys that just needed points. And I watched Neal bending on his pipe. He's over beating on his pipe with a hammer. I said, what are you doing? He said, just a little bitty short track. I said, I'm trying to make it where it'll get out of the corner better. So if I flatten the pipe up here a little, it'll make it have a little more bottom end and not spin the tires bad and get out of the corner. Neal had all kinds of little tricks that he did that I guess some of them worked. If they worked in your mind, that's the biggest thing. And later on, of course, Carl Donaldson and Kate, we've been friends for years and years. And when Carl and or when Kim and Neal got married and had Helen. Well, Helen's about 5 years old, I guess, and we're staying at Carl's house one night, and Helen says, "Are you as famous as my dad?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, Helen." I said, what does it take to be as famous as your dad?" And she said, "Well, have you got your picture on a t-shirt?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I do." She said, "Well, I guess you're as famous as my dad then." I said, "Okay, I'll take that." So I didn't have one of my t-shirts with me, so when I got back home, back to Houston, I sent her a t-shirt, and which was one of my Hurst Yamaha Marine built for the fun of it t-shirts. So a couple of weeks later, a month later, I get a t-shirt from Helen, and it's got a picture of her on the front of the t-shirt that her and Kim went and had made, and she sent to me that I'm as famous as you and my dad now. I said, "I think you are because you've got your picture on a t-shirt." So Helen has been a really good friend. She's a great young lady. I'm really happy for her with her new baby. And as time went on, we've all been friends, Carl and Kate and Kim and Neal and Helen. And it's a great life. Racing was just so much fun. Granite City on Tuesday night, Santa Fe on Wednesday night, and then somewhere around the Midwest during fair circuit, we raced as much as 7 or 8 times a week back in the late 60s and early 70s. Of course, my claim to fame was AstroDome 1975. Everything just went peachy that day. I didn't ever have one problem. Had second fastest qualifying time, won the heat race, and won the main event. So I guess that was my claim to fame. And like I say, Neal was such an intelligent guy. Probably should have been a doctor, because he could. I mean, he read so many books and was so wise and taught Helen so much that I think it was really great the way he raised her. Because Kim was busy working all the time, and I think Neal spent most of the time with Helen, during the day, school and back and what have you. Well, that's about all I got.
Thank you, Darryl. As you look at some of these beautiful vintage motorcycles in the windows at Donaldson, Dick Mann's 350 BSA single trials bike. Dick Mann rode trials, Dick Mann motocross, and he was the Grand National Champion with the AMA twice. And now we're looking at young Carl Donaldson, the owner of this motorcycle shop, and looking at his 1948 125 Harley Davidson. This is a 125 two-stroke motorcycle. This was Carl's first motorcycle. He has restored it. If we look at the engine of this two-stroke 125 three-speed motorcycle, it is very similar to the DKW 125 that is parked right next to it. Carl acquired this 125 from Larry Williamson. We're going to talk to Larry Williamson from the Peoria Motorcycle Club. He's going to tell us about this DK motorcycle and about his racing career.
I bought this bike 15 years ago and sold it to Carl about 10 years or 5 years ago. This bike was designed in 1937, and it was part of the war reparation after World War II. 18 different companies copied this bike, including Yamaha, their first bike, BSA Bantam, CZ, Harley-Davidson Hummer. It just goes on and on. It's probably one of the best designed bikes to ever come out of Germany, as far as I was concerned. When I bought it, I was just fascinated about how close it was to my 48 CZ and the 48 Harley Hummer. I told Carl about it, and he had never seen one, as far as I know, and he said, "I'd like to see it," and I brought it down here and he bought it. It was a fun bike. I traded for it a Harley Topper with a sidecar. And the guy that I bought it off of brought it back from Germany, and he was the president of the Harley Hummers Club in the United States. And he said when he saw it in Germany, he was just fascinated by it, and that's the reason he bought it. everything on it looks just like the Harley Hummer except the seat and the fenders.
Okay, now let's explain to the audience that this is the two-stroke 125. So are we saying that Germany was the early leader in two-stroke engineering?
Yeah, Germany was real early in two-stroke design. They had a guy that designed the Suzuki racers and all that type of thing. Germany was real big on it. And this was part of the company that the four companies went in together over in Germany and formed one company, which today is still Audi. I don't know how many of those companies are still together, but Audi is the main company there now.
These engines almost that identical?
If you look at it real close to a 48 Harley 125, you can't hardly tell the difference. I was told that even the gears and the transmission will interchange, the piston will interchange, the rods, just about everything on it will interchange.
So it's a 3-speed or a 4-speed?
It's a 3-speed.
Dry clutch setup, and what clutch?
I really don't know.
Okay.
It's amazing how close it is to the Harley Hummer and the BSA Bandit.
Is this thing a runner? Does this thing run?
Yeah, it ran when I sold it to Carl. I had ridden it before I sold it to Carl.
So what's it like riding it?
It's like riding an old 125 Harley Hummer. It's fun to ride. I had a lot of fun with it while I had it.
Okay, now tell me your name and tell me why we know each other.
My name's Larry Williamson. I'm from Peoria originally. I live just outside of Peoria now. I belong to Peoria Motorcycle Club. I've seen every race at the Peoria TT since World War II. I'm now chairman of the board, have been for quite a few years at Peoria Motorcycle Club.
And what's your best finish at Daytona?
I finished second there, and I finished second at Daytona in 1963. In 1961, I led the first lap, and Roger Riemann led the other 99 laps. It was our first trip to the Speedway, and we didn't know what we were getting into when we went to that Speedway. We were amazed by it.
So what kind of bike were you riding?
Back then I was riding a Harley. The first two times I went, and then I got a ride with the Triumph Corporation, and I finished second in 63 under a Triumph.
And what's your best finish at Peoria?
My best finish at Peoria was a third in 1960, but I qualified for the National from 1959 till I quit racing in 1965.
Thank you, Larry. As we look at the leathers of Kevin Atherton. Kevin Atherton was a Harley-Davidson factory rider, a genuine go-fast, and a pretty good friend of mine. And I had the opportunity to talk to his dad, Dave, and he's going to tell us a short Neal Keen story.
David Atherton, 1971 racing at Auto City Speedway, Flint, Michigan. I ended up getting crashed and broke my arm and knocked out. Next thing I knew, I wake up in the ambulance, and I'm thinking I'm at Santa Fe Speedway, but I was in Michigan. And when I woke up and looked up, here's Neal peering in the side of the ambulance, checking on me to see if I was okay. I have other, other connections with Neal, but that was one of my favorites.
So, short tracking. I mean, what did you consider Neal going to the races? Was he an advisor? Was he?
No, at that particular time, Neal was like one of the premier short trackers. He had focused at that time on short tracks. But anyway, that was his deal, short track racing at that time.
Thank you, David. As we look at this statue of Neal Keen on his BSA Gold Star. For more information on Donaldson Cycle, go to donaldsoncycle.com, donaldsoncycle.com. They're on St. Charles Rock Road. Give them a call at 314-427-1204. For Darryl Hurst, send him an email, hurst34@gmail.com. Peoria Motorcycle Club is peoriamotorcycleclub.net. On Facebook, it's Peoria Motorcycle Club. Don't forget TeamChicago.tv, walkwithdan.com. Check out more clips on YouTube at Dan Schmitt Motorcycle Racing.